Okay, our why of the week: 90% of mothers who pause their career plan to return to the workforce. Why do you think our culture does not build systems that honor that ambition?
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, okay, cool, great to hear. Uh, I think we've inherited so many tropes about stay-at-home motherhood from generations past, and we have a really binary view on sprint and go hard on your career or take your foot off the gas and your brain goes and dies. And the reality is that those sort of false divides were never true, and especially not anymore. And a lot of my work is about catching up the narrative so women can pause or shift their career without shame.
Yeah, tell us your why. Take us back to the moment you decided to. Well, first of all, you have a book. You're the author of The Power of Pause. Take us back. What was going through your mind emotionally, professionally, personally when you decided to take that career break?
Mm. So I had my first child on New Year's Day 2016, and I was so, motherhood is a lot of things, and it is in those early weeks, you were sleep deprived, there was milk everywhere, but like something about being with him felt very freeing in a way. Like there was no politics, there was no trying to fit in or climb. And I think I was craving that for a long time. I had, up until that point, had a lot of self-worth and belonging wrapped up in my work. I was running brand at a tech startup. I just graduated Stanford Business School. So a lot was sort of really hung up on my professional capacity, but there was something so sweet and so simple and so also not simple, actually, like truly interesting. Like I feel like I was learning again, and I'd stopped learning professionally for a little while. And so when I initially chose to downshift my career, meaning I went part-time, eventually I would pause, but as soon as I started circulating that news and saying, I want to take my foot off the gas, I started hearing, are you giving up? Are you going to be bored all day? Did you waste that spot at business school? And, I think what was wild about it was I had never felt so sort of energized and confident and creative in my choice and in my days. And I was meeting all these incredible women, similarly, who had really established careers, who had really modern relationships with their partners, who were choosing to pause or shift, and none of it matched the very like dated stereotype we were all being handed. And we were all on the other side of some unwelcome commentary. And I think a lot of it was, like I mentioned, the moment we were living in, there was so much content around sort of the traditional working mother, and it just left this whole other group of women who were trying to figure out, like, well, we either want or need to spend time with our family. Does that mean we're less ambitious, less modern, less full of potential?
Do you feel like the feminism movement kind of ruined motherhood for a lot of moms in a way?
I don't think it ruined motherhood. I think it put motherhood in a box. I think a lot of the second wave of feminism was built on this idea that we had to prove our capacity in the workforce and that we were equal to men. And a lot of that was sort of saying and hiding the other parts of our life that were unique to womanhood. And actually what happened, and if you look at sort of the 1970s when that started to peak, it was around the same time that television was like beaming in those sitcoms, Leave It to Beaver. So June Cleaver, to this day, if you ask the American public who they think of as the stay-at-home mom, they will still say June Cleaver, right? This like apron clad caricature. And it's because part of what happened with the feminist movement is we, in an effort to prove our capacity in the workforce, we left anyone doing work in the home and the idea of caring for our family sort of like shut in the 1970s with apron strings saying like that's the other end and that's defending tradition. And the reality, what we know now is, first of all, like that binary didn't exist then. And what we've realized is that women have gotten to this point where they're saying, well, we made it in the workforce, right? And all of this striving but we do want time with our kids. And we now, I think this next wave of feminism that I'm really excited about is like, well, what if we get to a place where we can say now, we did all that work to prove our capacity in the workforce, and now we're going to talk about like what's unique to womanhood that allows the workplace to work better for us, right? Because I think we hid it for so long. You can't advocate for support and you can't ask for support in systems if you're pretending not to have those needs and wants. And I think it's like this moment of saying it's time we talk about how we make this all work for us a little bit better.
Yeah. In your book, The Power of Pause, you talk about redefining ambition for modern mothers. What does ambition mean to you today versus what did ambition mean to you prior to becoming a mom?
Well, I can remember the day. It was probably like I had two kids. It was maybe 2018 then, and I Googled ambition because I had like just put them down and I was so tired. Like, it was just I was still getting my footing with two. And I remember being like, well, I should do something. Like I should be using my time. And I looked up the dictionary definition, and ambition is defined as the determination to do things. That's it. Like no clarification on what those things are. And I think if we take that dictionary definition, then we can say, well, we're going to do a great many different things over the long game of life if we're lucky, right? And if we think about a platter of a lot of different priorities that we care about, we're going to naturally shift our energy and focus to those different things. And if we're truly ambitious, then we are intentionally aligning our time and energy with the things that are of most meaning to us, that will make us, when we look back, feel the most successful. And we're trusting in the long game, we're recalibrating often. And I think that that is, I think that I hadn't given myself time or space to think about ambition. I just associated it blindly with climbing a ladder through my 20s and early 30s. And I think when you really are challenged to think about, well, I identify with ambition, and yet I need and want at this moment to have more time with my kids. Well, how do you hold both of those things? And so a big part of this work has been redefining a lot of the tropes for ourselves so that we can all walk through it with a little bit more confidence.
So 60% of married households in the US are now dual income. Are moms feeling more empowered, do you think, because they are bringing in an income, or are they just more exhausted?
Mm, I think both and right. I think that we've to the point of feminism, right? I think it's a really exciting moment when we have unlocked that type of equity in the household, and we've done it without necessarily having the value and systems in place to allow us to enjoy the other parts of real life, right? Like if we're also having children and also having marriages and also needing to have 100 grams of protein a day and like walk, like how is it all happening? And
Yeah.
so I think this sort of coming back to how can we re-examine it all to make it work better for us? And that's why a big part of writing The Power Pause was never to say pausing is the right choice. It's to say it is another respected and valid choice and we need more choices. We need more options that allow us to create sustainable lives, right? And careers. And this work is really to make sure that when and if women need or want to pause, by the way, 1 in 3 women feel forced to pause because of the cost of childcare, right? 60% cite financial considerations, 87% cite like just wanting time with their kids, which is extremely valid. And 79% say less stress in the home because having dual income households is stressful, because someone has to take care of those children and the needs of the home. So for all those reasons, if women need or want to pause or shift, we want to make sure that they feel financially safe, they feel respected and valued, they feel supported so they can pour back into themselves. And ultimately, when they transition back to work, they're seen for like, oh, wow, you did actually grow and explore a tremendous amount during that stage too.
I love the way you worded that because I feel like on social media, you probably see this time and time again, just with your book and the niche, of your book. Um, it's the battle of what's harder,
Mhm.
stay-at-home mom or working mom. Like, and all the stay-at-home moms want to feel validated, and all of the working moms want to feel validated. So I love the way you worded that of like, if you want to take a pause, that's totally valid. If you don't want to take a pause, that's also totally valid. It's not framing that mindset of like, if you take a pause, you're falling behind, you're not going to be the boss babe, that everybody looks at. And then if you do take a pause, you're not
Any
less
less
than
than.
either. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Well, I mean, one of the things I like to share is that there's some great research that I did not do it. It was actually Stuart Friedman who wrote a piece for Harvard Business Review, and it's called How Your Careers Impact Your Children. And it's basically zilch. Like, you can have happy and healthy children, whether you work in or out of the home. It's really the way in which you show up for your child and how present you are in the time you are with your child or children. And that the actual impact is measured not in hours, but in mindset and attitudes toward parenting. And I think that that can be achieved in so many different environments, right? What serves the child best is that their parents are happy, healthy, whole, and are enjoying whatever, and that the kids feel like there's a confidence in the home, that they're making the best right choice for them. And that's what we want. And I'll be honest with you, I've worked part-time with kids. I have worked um, full-time now for myself, which is different. I have worked mostly in between, and I've fully paused for, 5 years. There are just no, it's harder in different ways, each of them, right? There's
I
sort of,
was just gonna ask, what's the hardest?
I will say that there is no, like when I was fully at home with no help, right? Like, let
Yeah.
me say that. Like, I think that that's a big part of the equation. When I
Mhm.
was fully at home with no paid help, that was just unequivocally like the 24/7 nature of
Yeah.
it and the emotional labor of it, of raising, at that point, like, for an 18-month-old, right? Like that's just like it's full on that physicality and the emotional regulation that's needed for that stage. So that was demanding. I think I think it was harder on my heart trying to like do 6 months around building and putting this book out into the world and like having an office and also wanting to be at home and like show up present during while there was still headspace. So I like always struggle with this idea of even trying to compare because one was hard physically, one was hard on my heart. There were so many permutations in between. By the way, when I was in between, I think the blessing and burden of the in between, which I talk a lot about because I think the black and white ideas of stay at home and working mother are actually so antiquated. Like more of us actually exist in between and are sort of dialing up and dialing down, and you're a pickup some days and not a pickup some days. I feel like the in between came with like this amazing blessing of having to get to work a little bit on the things I love and be with them, except it was a constant choice every day of like, am I going to be picking them? Like, am I, so there was this constant thinking. So I mean, there's challenges with everything. And the best thing that I think I did was like every year chose. What a privilege to get to say, like, I am choosing this for right now, and I accept what's not for right now. Because there's always trade-offs, right?
Yeah, my friend up here, when we were at a park, there was a mom who came up to us and she's like, "Oh, do you do paid work or unpaid work?" And I thought that was so interesting because it's like when you're a stay-at-home mom, you are doing unpaid work, right? Like they're so and then if you do paid work, that's great too. Like it's just I think it's people are now starting to label paid work versus unpaid work or like motherhood versus an actual paycheck from a corporation differently, which is kind of cool.
It's interesting because I think everyone's looking for the vernacular, right? Like, and I try and offer, because I think one of the big questions that will come up is what do you do? Like, that's like the universal stumbling block, right? I remember
Yeah.
the first time I word vomited. And I think what can be helpful because people keep asking me, like, well, what is the new label for stay-at-home motherhood? And like, I just want to be done with labels. Like, I want women to be able to say, right now, I'm mostly with my kids. We'll see what comes next. Or right now, I'm working on like seeing a book go out into the world. Like, whatever your focus, whatever you're excited to share in that moment. But I think when we lean into sort of more of this fluid narrative, then women can dial up or dial down or shift focus or hold things sort of side by side in a blend. with sort of less of that feeling boxed out of conversations.
That's so true. I live in the Bay Area right now, and it's very much like a two income house, most majority. I don't really meet a lot of moms. I usually meet a lot of nannies, but if I do meet moms, they're like, "Oh, what do you do for work?" And I feel bad almost saying, "Well, I'm just a stay-at-home mom." And then they kind of like look at me like, "What?" And I don't have much else to say. Like, "Oh, I'm a part-time podcaster." Like, I don't know. I feel more pressure to say that I am a part-time podcaster first versus I'm a stay-at-home mom because the dialogue shuts off. They don't have
Mhm.
anything to talk to me about.
And what if you just said, and I talk about this, like, what if you said, right now, I get to be with my kids and I'm running a podcast alongside, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's
Yeah, I
like,
love that.
it flows off. And you, by the way, I think that this all takes practice, right? Because we've been handed language down. Like, the one thing I don't want anyone to say is just a mom, like, because you're not just a mom. Like, motherhood is just, and it's not in the like saccharine kind of way when people are like, motherhood's the hardest job. Motherhood is just truly like the day to day of parent, like the thinking that goes into managing these children and anticipating their needs and building a community around them and facilitating their relationships with other people. Like, it's a lot,
Right.
it's, and so, yeah, I think part of it is having to practice, because it does take practice, just like any transition. And I think a lot of the book is language to let you walk through it, like those day to day, like those conversations around budgeting with your partner, like how you frame it in a way that you can feel good, right? But a lot of it, all of it takes practice.
What do you think one of the biggest misconception is about taking a career pause?
Yeah, probably that your career, it's a career ender, right? Or that it's a life pause. Um, and part of that is that we need to, among ourselves, when you take a pause, approach it differently, like having that openness of, this is one chapter. This is not forever. It's not black and white. And I do, even if you don't have like a goal line or an end line, knowing that you've brought along with you all of this incredible experience from your prior career. And now you're stepping into a chapter where you're shifting time and focus to a set of priorities, but you can get really intentional about ways in which you can grow. And I think that that's often diminished. And even if you did none of this, right? Even if you would naturally change your perspective, you would deepen your communication skills because you're breaking down very big concepts to a 5-year-old, right? And you would you definitely work on your empathy and your leadership, and all of that would happen even if you did nothing else. And then a lot of what I talk about is how might you actually say, I'm going to use a little bit of time. Like, yes, I paused my career to raise my kids, but a lot of women, modern women, are also saying, I'm also doing this to make room for myself. And how might I, you know consider what I never got to do with my kids before, with in my professional career, and how might I move myself a little bit forward against different goals. Like, I think one of the things that often happens is you step into a career pause and suddenly your success is like how well your kids are behaved, or how clean your house is. But what if success was actually like, I'm going to write in great detail, like my ideal day in 5 years, who I'm spending time with, what my marriage feels like, what my relationship with my kids feel like, what my body looks like or feels like, what I'm spending time on. And not because you're going to start doing that, but because it reveals like the most authentic personal and professional and family goals, right? It might be, I want to build a media platform around motherhood, and something small I can do to plant the seeds for that. For me, it was, I want to write. I'd always wanted to. So it was 3 blog posts a week, right? On a personal level, I'd always wanted to work on reactivity. And the vision I had for myself for 5 years from now was like much calmer. So I thought, like, okay, I can listen to a podcast once a week about women in anger, women in communication, relationships. And that was my way of feeling like, yes, I'm not going to go do like, success is not, can't be my kids' behavior, because that's like a surefire way to feel like a failure. And it also can't be, I'm going to go build this media platform, but what's a little way that I can feel like I'm dignifying this time for myself? and moving myself forward. And I think that that part of the equation, that women can intentionally grow and build their network through friends that they meet in motherhood, is often disregarded.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a flawed belief to think that your career or your interests are dying when you choose to take a pause, because
Right.
it's just not true. Like, even with my own experience, I did broadcast journalism prior. I did a little bit of part-time work when my daughter was born and a little when my son was born. And then I completely stopped and I have re-entered, right, with this podcast. And it's like I'm flexing that muscle again. So yeah, it's never to say that leaving your career when if you choose to do that um, is an end all be all.
No, and I love that you're talking a little bit about how the skills and interests from your previous profession obviously went with you, right? Like they don't disappear, they don't belong to the network when you leave it. You get
Right.
to decide, like, oh, that goes with me. And then how might I use this next chapter to explore other ways? And for some people, it like you find a new way to express it around new topics and interests. And for other people, it's like a whole new, like, I get to explore again. And women, you'll see big pivots because women have the sort of space to say, well, and I encourage women to think about it this way. How might you like study yourself a little bit? Right? Like notice the like content that you linger on a little bit when you're scrolling social media. Notice the conversation or podcast you listen to that like sparks an idea. Make note of it because oftentimes it leaves clues for like, oh, that like is it something that I'd always wanted to explore that I haven't, right? And the opportunities to volunteer or like have conversations with friends you meet on the playground or play spaces, those spark a lot of interesting new ideas.
I'm excited to get this podcast out because I think on social media, there's kind of this like narrative that some accounts will push of like you're too far behind. Like you got to play catch up. Like hurry moms, like are you a stay-at-home mom that needs to make money? Like hurry. And there's so many stay-at-home moms that don't necessarily even want or need to hustle and start
Yeah.
something online. But they feel that like feeling of left out or they're going to need to play catch up when in reality there's so many moms that just like you mentioned will take a pause for 5 or 10 years and then they come back out and they have billion-dollar companies. Like you just the timing is perfect for everybody. Something that I did think of and I would love to get your opinion on is the gap in the resume for parents.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for a mom who is afraid to take time off to be with her kids because of that resume gap?
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the big reframes I offer is that it's just a time of non-traditional experience that you're adding as another layer, right, to your career portfolio. I think that's a big, we inherited this idea of a gap from the very linear resume, as opposed to a portfolio is made up of a lot of different experiences that help shape what you can offer a company. Um, and there's a couple different ways to approach it. One idea is if you really have been on a more full pause, you might write career sabbatical for a family life, right? Or career pause. And I offer a number of different examples for this, but say you say career sabbatical for family life. Then what you want to do is you want to also build some bullets to basically speak to not only the ways in which you grew in parenthood, but ways in which you might have flexed your relevant skills in other ways. So I use the example of this woman down in North Carolina who I interviewed, and she, I kind of to the point of this serious self-study where I said, like, open an iPhone notes or a Google Doc. She was just about a year out, and I always recommend to women when they're considering transitioning back to the workforce, get a lot, at least a year, but ideally you're doing this in the beginning. You're setting the goals that we're talking about. You're getting support so you can invest just a little bit of time to move yourself forward in ways. But say you're ready to go back first thing, like start with your friends. Like those are your mom friends are actually an amazing networking tool. In this case, the woman had this Google Doc, and she had written down one time that she'd felt particularly proud of herself, and it had been when she'd reorganized her kids' bus route because their kids weren't getting picked up often. It did two things. One, it revealed to her that she was actually pretty interested in project management, which was a little bit of a difference from what she was doing before. And she started to cater her search toward that. Then, under career sabbatical for family life, she had this very impressive bullet. She wrote, implemented highly technical infrastructure change to local organization. Right? That was what she did in her ordinary day to day motherhood. That's what she did. And, when you look for those and you start to chronicle those little ways in which you stayed engaged in your community, in your school system, in your day to day with your child, especially when you're managing diagnoses or advocating for new supports in education, or you're researching, facilitating a family relocation, right? Like those things have merit. And I think being able to reflect on them and start to assemble those relevant bullets. And sometimes you can gain a little bit more. I always think about the stepping stones that we can also plant, right? Like helping a friend on their podcast, right? On behind the scenes. A friend of mine, who I actually included in the book, she was at a swim practice and she heard her other relatively new friend mention that she was starting a nonprofit around kids education. And she realized, like, oh, that's a nice way for me to get involved. And she definitely included that, yes, it was free, but no one needs to know that. It was a way in which she was able to exercise her skills, and it gave her something to talk about. I think small to medium businesses that women are running, right, are a real interesting way for other women who want to work 5 or 10 hours or just build skills to be able to contribute and sort of help shape that career sabbatical as they're preparing to return. And then the other little thing is, if you are freelancing or consulting or you're running a podcast, you don't even need to write career break if that doesn't feel relevant to your LinkedIn community or your professional community. You can absolutely write freelancer and talk about the projects that you've worked on, right? And so those are sort of the two options that you can think about.
I love that story about the project manager mom, North Carolina. Like, it's so true. Imagine, like, mothers should write on their resume, like, kept two humans alive, like, taught, respect, basic life skills. Like, that is a huge value add that, like, a lot of people don't have.
And
Yeah,
it's
you need that to be successful in any job.
Yeah.
Like organizational skills, executive functioning.
it's amazing to me how much easier, as I've transitioned back to the workforce, right? Like I think that even though I work for myself, there's so much interfacing with a lot of different personalities, and the perspective I have based on the years I spent with my children is just enormous. The patience, just the ability to figure out, prioritize. I think that that's a big one that we all have, because you have a hard stop and you kind of figure out, like, what's the big boulders to move and what you can drop. And I think those skills, I worry that we're moving in the direction of talking about some of these leadership training skills gained in motherhood, but that for some people it's lip service, when it really deeply is felt and true.
When you were like in the trenches with your kids, I think you said 4 and 18 months, what were some daily practices, or, I know you had the little Google Doc, but like what were some daily practices if you had a rough day? What kind of saved you in that rough day? Was it like daydreaming of a future career, time alone? Like what can a mom who is, let's say she's fresh on maternity leave and she's used to that structure and she feels a little lost, like what advice would you have for her?
I would definitely think about, whenever women feel lost, I always say read chapter 4. Like, it's really about redefining success for yourself right now, right? And I know success and goals, you can get, sometimes people roll their eyes at because they're like, how do you have time for goals? But goals don't have to be big, right? It could be the 3 blog posts, or I remember my family goal was I wanted a silly household. So for me, success in the thick of it was like, I'm going to have a dance party every single Monday. Like, and it made me feel like I think just getting intentional goals dignify your time. And that way, when you don't feel like life's happening to you, right? But I think the other thing it did is it starts to become a filter of how you're going to spend this year or 3 years, because it starts being about, well, this is time for me too, right? This is a time for me to grow as well. And as soon as you switch that in your brain and realize like this isn't just about service to your family, you have to also invest in yourself. Then two things that were really important become front of mind. So one is rhythms, like designing rhythms around the day. And they really served me when I was in the thick of it, meaning, well, what are the things that I want to focus on that give us some sort of flow? They feed my sense of fulfillment too. So for me, it was art. Like if you had found me with my kids at 4 and 18 months, you can go back through my phone and we were making, like, I just love that having back pocket, like science experiments from Pinterest that was like messy play. I had a high tolerance for mess that I could do. I hated cooking for the kids. So I really lowered my standard on that. Like that to me, I was able to let go of like fancy meals for the kids, keep that super simple. I mentioned before, really knowing that a goal for myself was reactivity. I figured out, okay, well, I want to start a meditation practice and I want to start a small journaling practice. That's going to take me 20 minutes. I'm going to keep it simple. So I turned to my partner and said, like, these are important for me and I need to feel healthy and whole. And I think so often when women are not working for pay, we think, well, if you're not working for pay, you don't deserve or need help. And I think realizing that whether or not that help is paid or unpaid, that support is, no one should work 24/7, right? Like that is just impossible. And I think when I was able to accept, like, I can't do all of these things, what else can I do? So I'd say to my husband, can you wake up with the kids? And can I have that time for myself, for that meditation practice, for that journaling practice? Can we decide together that cleaning and cooking is not going to happen until after the end of the day together? Can we lower the standards on cooking? So a lot of it was this combination of deciding that this time was also for myself, that there were these areas I wanted to grow or explore. And then where does that come from? So how can I find time for that? Whether that's a paid babysitter or a mother's helper for 15 hours a week, or whether that's my husband waking up with them and coming home early. Um, and how can I optimize sort of the rhythm of the day, like create a predictable rhythm that focuses more on things that I can enjoy too, and sort of lowers the expectation of the things that give me less joy. And that really, it helped. It's never easy, but it helped. It feel like it was my time too.
I love
So,
that perspective shift. Go ahead, Chels.
no, I was just gonna say something that you mentioned was the partner, and I think that's something we didn't even bring up throughout this whole podcast was it is, I think, a game changer depending on what type of partner you have. Do you even have a partner that wants you, is gonna allow, quote unquote, allow you to stay home? Because if they are bringing in the income, then that is going to be an agreement that you have. Okay, I'm doing the work at home, you're doing the work outside of the home, and that can really throw a wrench in your plan as a mother if you want to stay home, as if your partner's on board or not.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought that up because, after the identity shift around ambition and feminism, the like second big foundational piece is, are you in a relationship that will value your contribution if it's unpaid?
Hmm.
And so I really like to offer this idea of an interdependent household, right? Because the partner working out of the home, I'll use my example. My husband was building a tech company at that time, which definitely influenced my decision to pause. He was gone like every other week, right? And he could not have gotten on those planes to the Bay Area if I hadn't been the security net at home. So his ability to single task in the workforce depended on my having paused and shifted my career, right? And I think that that was a dialogue that had to happen clearly. We luckily were in the practice, and I talk about this in that second chapter, in the practice of having money meetings and annual planning meetings where we were budgeting together for what we wanted to invest in. And so we had that forum to talk about, we're going to make this shift. Are we both going to be on board with that mindset that this household income is shared, that we both deserve to be healthy, whole, and supported, that on my workday ends up like 6 2, right? Like if you're coming back in, because a lot of that is foundational to setting yourself up to be able to thrive. And so If your partner is not on board and this isn't as much of an agreement, then you can keep having the conversation and bring in different data points and keep sort of putting pen to paper on how this could work. You could plan on downshifting to part-time work if you want to optimize for time with your child or a little bit less stress, and you want to or need to stay connected to income. The other thing that also comes with some stigma, but I think it can be really powerful, is consider a postnuptial agreement that, puts pen to paper on, we're making this shift. Everyone's interests are going to be protected. We enter contracts all the time with employers, and it's a way in which to just say, this is, these are our expectations of each other. And this might be a time that, maybe in a year that we're going to come back and revisit the decision, right? It just helps get it out and planned for before you find yourself in a situation that is icky. For the most part, I think our generation of dads, they're spending 3 times the amount of time with than any generation before. I think it's a very different, um, it's a very different partner than generations past. And you sort of, everyone has to have those conversations to tune into their own gut intuition on how they feel.
Let's say a mom and her husband talked about her staying at work prior to having children. They were both on the same page, right? Then the mom has her baby and she kind of feels this shift internally and is like, I don't think I want to go back to work. But, they already talked about it. So she tries to tough it out, whatever. And then decides to leave work. And her husband is like, we can't afford this financially, not on the same team. What advice do you have for that mom?
Keep having, well, first of all, you can continue to have the conversation. I always say, set when something feels uncomfortable, set increments of time to come back and revisit, right? Like 3 months, 6 months, just to see if anything has shifted in the home. Um, One idea too is that lean into that idea of the gray area and there being a vast in between the old ideas of stay at home and working, right? Meaning, yes, there's always full pauses. It is certainly one option, but you think about what you're trying to optimize for. Is it more time with your child? Is it less stress? The reason I'll use a couple examples. If it's more time with your child, what are the other options? Could you talk to your partner, talk to your employer about a 2-day or a 3-day work week, right? And trial part-time. If it's less headspace, I've talked to women who have just chosen to let go of management duties or take almost like a demotion, not a demotion, but like a sideways move just to be able to say, I'm going to stay connected to this income, but I'm optimizing for something. So I think having a little bit of reflection on what you're looking for, what you're craving, what would help your household function better, and experimenting a little bit. I think bringing employers into the conversation is super helpful. I do think it's helpful to go to them with a plan. So I always use this example of a woman I met down in Dallas who had negotiated a 2-day a week work week at HSBC, which is absolutely wild because financial industries have been notoriously non-flexible. And I asked her how she did it, and she said she called a friend who had a friend at JP Morgan who had negotiated a 2-day a week work week. And she basically took that template and presented it to her boss. And so, I think, yes, there's a little bit of diligence you have to do with yourself of what are my other options. But then the next step is like, how can I look even outside of my company for examples of how this might work? And then try and go to your employer with as sort of baked of a plan as possible.
I love that. Yeah, it's like it doesn't have to be black and white, like you said. There can be a gray area, and that can be a beautiful thing for a mom who wants to do both. Um, I just want to end with our final question. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, whatever space you were at, what would that piece of advice be?
That when people judge, it usually has more to do with what they're working through and trying to make sense of. You can imagine the number of people who had something to say about my decisions around my career. And, when I came to think of it, some of the harshest criticisms were from women, and I wondered why. And it was because they were reconciling their own choices, right? Whether those choices were 40 years before, or they were more recent and they were sort of real-time processing. And I think understanding that in motherhood ends up becoming your superpower, because you will have to make decisions over and over again for your kids and what's right for you and your family without everyone always understanding.
Yeah, I love that. Do you? Do what works for you. Neha, thank you so much. Where can people buy your book? Give us your socials, everything.
Well, you can buy the book anywhere you love to get books. You can come subscribe at motheruntitled.com. There's a lot of free resources, from flex jobs to guides around finances and guides to talking to your partner. Or you can follow on Instagram at Mother Untitled.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, where can people find you? Give us your handles. Where can people buy your book?
You can buy you can buy my book anywhere you love to get books, and you can follow me at Neha Ruch on Instagram, and you can subscribe to our newsletter or get all sorts of free resources at thepowerpause.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Moms Ask Why. It's Brittany and Chelsea. Chelsea, I want to dive right in because we were talking yesterday about you starting to delegate and schedule things for your nanny and how it was hard for you. Hopefully, you're okay talking about this because we were voice noting about it, but I thought it was so relatable for other moms how you have just started to delegate tasks for your nanny and how you were having a hard time giving up control.
Yeah, I definitely needed to do it. But the loss of control was hard for me. And it's crazy because I feel like that's just the staple of motherhood, right? Like you want to do everything, but then if you do everything, you really don't give your 100%. So, being a full-time working parent, you pick and choose. It's like, does does your business or your job get 100% that day, or does your child? And so I think if you have help that you can delegate, it will be life-changing. It has been life-changing for me, I will say. Like, it has been really tough, right? Because I wanted control. I want to pick up my kids from school. I want to know how their day was, I want to look back and say, "Oh, I got to pick my kids up from school." But it's not realistic with the state of my life right now and being a full-time working mom. So yeah, I did do that. I also delegated some small tasks. I just I needed the help. I started delegating some laundry, so I do have my nanny wash my kids' clothes now. I did increase her pay, so don't come after me, you guys. I have her just vacuuming the downstairs. Just small shifts as a working parent that have really, really helped me are those things: having her wash and fold the boys' clothes and put them away, having her vacuum the boys' rooms. I also have her prepare dinner so that when I transition from work to mom at home, um, my kids want to spend time with me. They don't want me working again by cooking them a meal. So I started having her prepare dinners so that when I do transition from my office to my kitchen, it
Your
goes
other
seamless.
office. I said the kitchen's your other office, but yes, like no, but
From office A to office B. Yeah.
I love that you said when we were talking, you were like, I have to let go of the control that my nanny can make a meal as good as I can because you've taught her how, you know?
Yeah. My nanny is a gem. I mean, she's incredible. She has adapted to my crazy lifestyle of no food dyes, no gluten, no high sugar foods. Like she's so creative with what she'll make my kids, knowing what their diet restrictions are. And they always say, right, like if you're going to hire someone and they can at least do 85% as good as you would get the job done, then you have to let it go. And I would say she does 99% as well as what I would do. It's just losing the control of it. It was hard for me. So yeah, I mean, she does just as good of a job as I would. And so I have to let it go. And you know what? At the end of the day, it does suck. Like I still have this like mental like, but I want to be doing it. But it does help me so much. Like it just helps relieve space in my mind, like the mental load.
Yeah. I think if you actually think about all the tasks you do and you wrote them down, chef, like housekeeper, full-time business owner, part-time school psychologist, like emotional support for children and husband. Like you would, I think, Chelsea, your list would go on and on and on. Like it's amazing to me that you haven't delegated sooner because, but I get it. It's like I fall guilty of that too, where I'm like, I want to do everything. Like,
Yeah.
and when we were talking to our upcoming guest, Neha Ruch, she was saying, that we can't do 100% all the time. And one of the hardest things for her was actually, even when they could afford it, was finding someone to come in and help her. Because giving
Yeah.
up that control as a mom is so hard. And I fall guilty of it too, where I'm like, that person did this wrong, or that nanny was on her phone for like a microsecond. That's so irresponsible. Like, you know what I mean?
Totally. Totally. I know. It's the control piece. It's so interesting when she did say that, like, we could afford it, but I didn't know if I wanted it. I'm like, what?
Right.
But it does make sense. Like and you don't want to miss out. Like there's so much narrative pushed online of like, your child only has 17 summers. It's like, can we stop with,
I'm guilty of that. I
ah,
saw that post once where it was like, we only have, because my husband says it all the time. My husband is always like, these are the days. We only have 18 summers with our kids. And it's almost this doomsday thing where I'm like, holy shit, I need to make everything perfect then. And like, we,
absolutely. I
yes.
know.
And it's so true. It's like, let's stop that narrative because I'm still in contact with my parents. Like, you are too.
Totally. If they want to pay for a Hawaiian vacation this summer, I will be there.
Literally. Come knocking on their door.
You
No.
guys want to do another summer? Did you miss one of the 17 summers? Like, I'll take it now.
To take it.
No, for sure. I mean, I do think it's a good reminder to like be present with your kids. Like, I think that's absolutely important. But at the same time, telling parents, like, you only have this much time, like, put your phone down, like, don't work.
Yeah.
Pick up your kids, don't send the nanny. It's like, okay, do you want my head to spin off into space and then explode? Because that's what you're telling me. Like,
Right. No, it's so true. I'm excited for everyone to hear this conversation because it was so refreshing to me to listen and be like, wow, we can't do it all. You
yeah.
know, like any mom on Instagram who says she's working full time, she's taking care of the kids full time, she's making every meal from scratch is lying.
Yeah, I totally agree. I completely agree. I think there's a lot of social media that's not shown. Like especially you'll see like I always use influencers for example because that is a business. You know, they do have things that they have to do. They have to film content. They're talking with brands, they're signing contracts, they're linking things. Like there are things they have to do and guarantee you they can't get that done without some sort of support. So they either
Yeah.
have a husband who stays home and is the stay-at-home dad. I see that a lot.
Hmm.
Or they have hired help that they just don't show. Like they're not showing, which I understand why. Like, why would you be filming? You know, I sometimes I would do videos of like what my kids are eating today and my nanny prepped this, but like to this day, I'm not gonna like, go out and be like, look, my nanny's here. So,
Right. No, it's true. And it kind of is a good reminder, especially for the trad wife trend. I think there was, there's an influencer, she has like 10 kids and people give her flack for not showing the help that she has or like the teachers that she hires to homeschool her kids. But
oh,
it's true, it doesn't fit with the narrative of her Instagram
her
feed.
brand. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not on brand.
it's not on brand. So I think it's important to reframe um, what motherhood looks like for you and realize that it's okay if you don't check off every single box because that's
I agree.
impossible.
I agree. I think that what we struggle with a lot as millennials too is being expected to do it all. And I always say, like, it's not always, it's a roller coaster, right? Like, you could be not making any money as a professional, and then you could skyrocket and start making a ton of money. And then you could go, back down. Like you're not always going to be a stay-at-home mom that doesn't produce income, but you're producing something else, which is quality lives in the world. So it's
Right.
like, what what part of the roller coaster are you on? Because it is roller coaster. Life is so long, and there's so many different phases and seasons that you're going to go through that are going to be different and challenging in every way, different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I really, really enjoyed how she framed things as well, right? Like she framed it as you can take a pause if you want in your career. You don't
Yeah.
have to. Like there wasn't this big,
Black and white narrative.
yeah, and like shamefulness of like, you're not pausing. Well, your kids are going to struggle. Like, do you
Right.
know the stats that kids end up in juvie if you're not a stay-at-home mom? Like, I hate those. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I really liked how she lays it out as here are your options, take control, be informed, and make your decision. And know that this isn't just a, spiral.
Yeah, with that, let's get right into it. We have Neha Ruch, author of The Power Pause on Moms Ask Why.